And at the end of the day, we really wanted to evolve this estimating tool into a differentiator for Balfour Beatty. So if we had something that could do all of these things I just talked about, that had all of these tools available to us, we feel like it would be a differentiator for us in Atlanta, as well as across the country. So once we decided and we came up with all of our goals for the project, the next step was really how do we go about implementing this change. And coming out of that national level meeting, one of the most important things I feel like we did was we created what we call a project charter. And this project charter really is nothing more than a plan that talks about all of the things I just went over, but it helps coalesce everything into one document. It helps you sell it to your everyday user. It helps you sell it to your executive level team. It helps you gain momentum internally to be able to get backing and maintain momentum for this implementation as you work through it. You know, typical implementation, I've been involved in 3 of them on a national level, and they typically take anywhere from 6 months to a year to do. And to maintain that level of momentum is constant change management. So this project charter, some of the things that I think are really important that we have in here, there's some things that I want to share with you. One is we focus on the very first thing, project objectives. What is this initiative about? Simply, it's about to implement a single uniform estimating software platform across the enterprise. And so why is it critical to Balfour Beatty? What does that initiative mean to Balfour Beatty? These are all things that we had in our project charter, and this is really what you utilize then to gain attention of, again, your everyday user and your executive level leadership. It's very important then that you begin to put together an organization chart. What does your project team look like? In here, we actually just did a simple chart. I'm sure I know you can't see it, but just half, 3/4 of a page. But what the most important pieces of it is that you identify executive level leadership. 2 things that we did that I felt were very important was we got the CIO, someone high level on our IT side, to be part of the executive level leadership to help us through the implementation piece, the technical implementation piece of the system. And then even more important was I was able to identify a chief operating officer of our Southeast region to be my executive sponsor to be able to help, sell it, maintain it, and push it through our executive leadership team as we began to understand everything from what does the change mean, what is the cost going to be, and what's the end product going to be. But identifying who that executive level sponsor was very important. And you make sure you put it right here on your org chart. The other piece, next level down, is your project team leadership. The way we set it up, we had a project manager from our IT side to help me facilitate working with our infrastructure side of the business, and also just to kind of help facilitate all the meetings and facilitate all of the conference calls and the daily grind of trying to get through it. And then we also had who the project leadership person is. In this case, it was me. So who's going to be who's that single point person making the decisions that you're, in our instance, that Beck Tech can reach out to when they need something and provide that higher level decision making. And then the final part of the organization, the team structure that was really important was, we have 5 different divisions and 12 different offices. And it was vitally important that we identified at least one person from every single office to be part of this implementation process. So in some cases, it was very gratifying. We actually had more than one person that was interested. So we wanted to try to keep the team small, flexible, but in some of those offices where everything, you know how it is, everything's very dynamic, you're very busy, sometimes it's good to have a couple people that are there that can flex back and forth. If one person's tied up doing something else, you have somebody else that's available to be on the call, on your weekly call, or to be part of an evaluation of part of the implementation. So we outlined who those people were in every office, and that essentially made up who our subject matter experts were moving forward through the implementation and into the rollout and the training. Another big significant part of your project charter is really what are your objectives, your sub-objectives, and your targets. So for example, you want to specifically go through and outline what is the scope of work that's involved in this implementation, and what is explicitly out of scope. So in this case, since we were just working on the estimating software itself, it was, in scope, it was 2D and 3D takeoff tools. It was a standardized cost database. It was a national project historical cost comparison. And it was comprehensive baseline uniform sort codes, WBS codes, reports, uniform reports, and estimating templates across the entire enterprise. But specifically out of scope here was there was no bid solicitation, no subcontractor management as part of this, no pre-qualification, and no subcontractor database. And then you kind of want to move through to what are some of your assumptions that you're making. Again, some of these are schedule related. In other words, a good example of one of the assumptions that an enabler here is that we want to have all of our divisions migrated to the Beck Estimator software by end of 2017. That was our goal. We want to decommission our existing tools by the end of 2017. Some of the enablers that we identified that were important for everybody to understand. Again, this is all about managing expectations and communication. Pre-construction and divisional leadership, you had to have buy-in and endorsement from everybody at that level across the enterprise. Participation by, I said it before, participation by all divisions, all offices. You need to have at least one person there representing their concerns and, as we go through the implementation. And then finally, a detailed work plan basically outlines your project deliverables, talks about a little bit about how you're going to break the job down. For example, we had a due diligence phase where we went and tried to understand exactly how everybody works, what's their workflow, who are their markets, what are their clients, what's their end products look like, do they have any costs for a cost database, what do their reports look like. We then had a configuration phase, which is, work through, try to understand, begin to build your cost database, build your reports, all your common sort codes. You want to understand, have a basic baseline estimate detail report. And then you get into your deployment phase, which is how are we going to roll this out, and how are we going to train. And a couple things on the deployment phase. We're actually in that phase right now in our implementation. And some of the things that we recognized is, from a training perspective, that you realize that if you try to bring a couple guys from Beck and they come in and they do 2-3 days of training, that 90% of the room's going to walk out of there and they're not going to be able to touch the estimating software for the next 2 or 3, 4, 5 months, however many months, because they're currently working on another project right now that they're not in a position to be able to make a transition from one tool to another. So it was important then to try and recognize that we needed to train everybody on a high level, but then have a subject matter expert there locally that's working with the local leadership to have actually almost a rollout training plan just for that office or just for that division. And so what project or projects are you in a position to pilot and pull a team together, a couple people that can really take a job, set it up, and begin using the new tool as you go through that local deployment? And what people are then going to ultimately need to be able to transfer over later on at a later date and be able to start either transfer into a new tool on an existing job, or when that job's over, be able to begin to use it. And that's why it's so important to have those subject matter experts there locally to be able to manage that local rollout that you have. And then the last thing we talked about was the support phase. Because you're going to have really a phased rollout, not just nationally, but each office is going to have its own phased rollout. You need to have a good support structure in place. And that support phase is what we have outlined. Who is the local subject matter expert or experts? And how is your technology partner going to help support you over the long term as you're beginning to roll that out to everybody in your division or office? And then, of course, the dreaded part of the project charter is the project cost part. This is where the CEO goes, "What? Oh my God!" So, no, one of the keys to really help facilitate the change. Again, we talked about we had 4 different estimating tools. We had 7, I don't know how many different takeoff tools. And really, we kind of took a look at what were we spending every year per user on each one of these tools. And if we can actually have one tool that can do all of these things, what's the savings? And so it was very surprising. We went through that cost study and presented it as part of this project charter. And you have your implementation cost, you have your licensing cost, and ultimately, from a licensing perspective, we were saving money as a company across the enterprise. We were saving money. So the only cost that we really incurred to be able to go through this implementation was the implementation cost itself, working with our technology partner, Beck, and then the rollout and training. And then also, as you kind of go through that, you start to your implementation and the ideas that you have, they begin to evolve because you start to see what the software can do. And so you want to make sure that one of the things you do is you make it clear that there are potential for enhancements and evolution of your implementation that you want to potentially fund and need the support of others in the near future. So again, it spurs the creativity of everybody that is part of the implementation team, and they begin to think, it'd be really nice if we could have it do this, or it'd be really nice if we could do that. And these are all things that, when you take a step back, that would be a worthwhile investment, and you really try and continue to communicate that to your executive leadership and your everyday user.